Assalamu alaikum viewers, welcome to Global Talks with Sohail Sidiq Ansari. Today we have with us an expert on especially Middle East and global issues. Especially we have renowned analyst Ahmed Zaki. Welcome Ahmed, welcome in our show.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, we'll start today's session, and definitely our first topic of discussion will be Iran-Saudi conflict. And definitely, if we remember 2016 attack on Saudi embassy in Tehran, and also connected another issue, the Sheikh Numar's execution. So, what you see these two factors just create the situation more bitter.
Thank you for having me. When we look the Middle East conflict, especially when it came to the Saudi Arabia and Iran conflict, it didn't start in one day. It was a development for centuries. Like this came after the new crisis came after when Saudi Arabia executed Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr, who was a Saudi Shia, who was leading protest against the corruption in Saudi Arabia. He was a focal point who was calling for a reformation of the economic situation in Saudi Arabia.
Having large followers also.
And with that, he take a role stop that he should have. He requested a lot of times that we need a reformation. But since Iranian leadership or Iranian mobs start giving him back, Saudi Arabia get irritated with that. And with that sense, they took a huge step that they accused him as a betrayal. And they took him to the execution that triggered out an anger for the Shias in Iran. They start protesting, and with the protest they go to the Saudi consulate, Saudi embassy in Tehran, and they attack with bombshells.
And that's connected with execution.
And that because of the reaction of the execution, that created a diplomatic cut down. Saudi Arabia removed their embassy, and they requested Iran embassy to go away from that.
In response of that,
in
response
of that.
Yeah.
And they did not take only that one step, they also take the step that they call for other GCC countries to revoke their embassies. And that put Iran an isolation point in the Middle East. One side, they were not having very good relationship with Israel. The other side, they don't have very good relationship with GCC. And now the only friend they have in the region was only Assad, and Assad was going under the civil war and civil crisis.
Oh, that made the situation more bitter, Ahmed. Then let's move to the next question. Do you see that both of the countries are trying to lead Islamic bloc? Do you see it?
There are two elements which Islamic world divide. Like number one is that it's the pace of sectarian conflict, which fueled which fueled by the Shia led by Iran and Sunni led by Saudi Arabia. And with this basic primarily conflict, both countries want to present themselves into the Muslim world. We are the leaders of the rest of the Muslim world. That triggered out when Saudi Arabia take the role of that the marriage between leadership of Saudi Arabia and the Saudi sheikhs, which are the custodian of the holy cities, Mecca and Medina. And with this marriage of convenience between the two institutions of the religion and the politics, Saudi Arabia was maintaining for a long time as a leader of the Muslim world. When Iran Revolution 1979 came to being, it started challenging Saudi's role of the Islamic world. They question a lot of time their strategy in the Muslim world, and especially in the Arab and Middle East. That put Saudi Arabia in a fear that they are going to lose their influence into the rest of the Muslim world, because there is another voice of saying that Saudi Arabia and their leadership of the Muslim world is not the right direction.
As far as the resources are concerned, both the countries are naturally rich with the wealth of oil, especially. So do you think they have different strategies and different policies on oil, especially? Do you think this difference of policy is also one of contention between both the countries?
Yes, Saudi Arabia is the largest exporter of the oil in the global. Iran is the second.
Second, true.
So both of them, they are part of the OPEC group, organization of the global oil exporter. The leadership, Saudi Arabia is the de facto leadership of the OPEC, because they are the largest producers of the oil, global energy.
Yeah.
In one side, Iran have not good relationship with America, which are the largest consumers of the global energy. And the second hand, they don't have very good relationship in the Middle East.
That's an important point.
Which makes Iran's energy very less influence in the global stage. So Iran have influence in Chinese consumption and Indian consumption.
Oh.
So India and China is the largest partners of Iran exporters of oil. Japan is also member of them, but all of them have less influence when it came to the Middle East issues and Middle East crisis, comparatively to the Washington and to the European Union.
As far as foreign policy of both the countries, we see on Saudis and there exists Saudi-US romance, and on the Iran's end there are self-reliance and independence in the foreign policy. So what do you see? Is there also a difference point between both the countries?
Yes, there are.
Pro-US and anti-US policy, especially, we say.
This is going to like what we call the IR theories. One is a liberal-led wall, which leads by this American institution. But when it came to the Middle East, they don't go for the liberalism point of view. They always use a realism point of view. They go through behind their own interests, not to the ideology which they believe the democratization of the Middle East or global democracy, propagating the human rights, because they are ignoring when it reaches to their own interest. Iran, as long as Iran concerns, Iran is a semi-religious state where the supreme leader is the ultimate authority of the country, regardless of their domestic or economic independence for the democratically elected government, like what we have seen Hassan Rouhani and the previous regime of Iran. Both of them, they came with the economic hope for the Iranian people, but they cannot make decisions without the influence of the religious leaders and the religious guidance of the Khomeini. So this makes the two countries, one as a conservative state, and the other one it makes that a monolithic kingship system where there is no choice of a political decision. There is only one family makes all the decisions.
Authoritarian
They are we cannot call authoritarian. They didn't come by power. Okay. It's kind of a kingship. It's kingship. It's inherited. So they, by birth, they are the
being done single-handedly.
Right. So Americans, they don't want to make Saudi Arabia a democratic country, because when it came to the if Saudi Arabia goes to the democratization, it goes to the against the interests of against the interests of USA. A lot of people of Saudis will raise a question that why we are going to give our excessive energy to USA without exchange a lot of money. So this is going to like a point of contention.
I mean, if we see Syria, Syria is like a mine in the region between both the countries. When its burst is blown out, and definitely we see, as far as Iran is concerned, he just stood with the Syrian government, and as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, he stood on the other end. Definitely, the elements they are opposing the government. So, what's the result?
An Iranian?
Yeah, in Syrian context. When Syrian civil war, after civil, it's the situation after Syrian civil war, when civil war broke out, and definitely on one side we see that Iran supported the Syrian government, initiatives and government and Saudi Arabia just supported the elements there against the Syrian government.
Exactly. The Saudi Arabia played a role of going against the regime of Assad. When we see the Syrian conflict, it was completely different than the rest of the Arab uprising. The Syrian uprising started from Idlib, where predominantly the Sunni-dominated area. And this Idlib, they have already have an element of negligence that the government is not going to give them their rights which they deserve from the central government. And this created a scenario that Assad government have now no more chance to survive as long as Hosni Mubarak gun, as long as the Yemen gun, as long as Tunisia gun. So now they have a chance that Libya gun, Egypt gun, Yemen gun, and Tunis gun. So now they want to change the regime of Syria with the same pattern. But when you come to the Syrian conflict have a complicated conflict where
some other actors also involved,
where the global actors have influence inside the Syria. So this changed the scenario where Iran played the role of the savior for Assad, while Saudi Arabia supported the uprising against it. It was again it's based on it's part of the sectarian part. Assad is a Shia. Those who are against Assad was led by the Sunnis. So now they are behind the same sectarian conflict, both Iran and Saudi Arabia, to have influence in Syria.
On same note, Ahmed, can we see in future, we say both are the Muslim countries definitely, but having different sects, on one side it's Shia sect, on the other end Sunni sect. So do you see, is there any kind of similarity in future? Do you see any some good situation between both the countries?
Depends on, if we check the how they can make a common point between them. They can have a common point if they are going to focus their own interest, regardless of their differences. So the problem is that Saudi Arabia is trying to make the role of Middle East as a only single-handedly religious guidance from all the Muslim world, while Iran is challenging that. It's not an economical issue between them. It's not an oil issue between them. It's an ideological difference between the two states. So here we can see now Saudi Arabia have a plan of 2030, which young Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman have proposed to this to Saudi Arabia. And what he wants is that Saudi Arabia should have to shift from the dependence on oil and make its own economic independence from the oil. If that's successfully done, the Saudi Arabian needs to convert from conservative society to the liberal society, which will make the state of Saudi Arabia more democratic than dictatorship or than kingship. If that could be successfully done with the huge social reformation, that will change the outlook of Saudi Arabia with the relationship that they have Iran. Sure. On the other hand, if Iran want to change their religious mindset leadership,
that's almost one time definitely.
And that will change Iran into the liberal society, which will make them easy to intermingle with the rest of the Khalij. Either whether it's Emirates or Kuwait, whether it's Saudi Arabia or the rest of the Arab world. That will give a chance that they can influence positively without creating any sort of the conflict between the other countries.
And lastly, I want to know what are the global interests, especially global actors involved in Syria. So what are the key factors they just grabbed the global actors to Syria especially?
Syria is, America was the savior of the Middle East when it came to the global power. They have more than 7 military bases in the Middle East. When it came to Syria, it's the only country in the Middle East that America don't have a military base. And Russia have no military base around the world except Syria. So now it's the challenge between Russia and USA. If USA successfully remove the Syrian-based military of Russia, that will make single-handedly the only ruler or dictated authority from the global powers that can dictate the security issues or mediate any conflict, as Washington become the only single-handedly power which mediates any sort of conflict in the Middle East. That Russia understand, and they intervene to save their place in the Middle East. They came to save Bashar al-Assad, regardless of his human rights violation, regardless of his killing his own people, regardless of his criminal activities that he have done against his own people. But Russia came as a global actor, saved Assad, shows that USA is not the only actor who can intervene in the Middle East. And now they are playing more vital role in the Middle East.
Oh, that's fine. We'll talk about Pakistan's roles on Iran-Saudi conflict, but right. Viewers, that's all for today. We have seen Iran-Saudi conflict, all the factors behind it, and definitely we see all the situations, and definitely we have discussed global factors. Thank you, Ahmed, for being with us. Viewers, see you for the next program.
Thank you for having me.